Hi everyone, Ryan Fletcher here, and this is a brand new video. In fact, the very first video on this YouTube channel. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you will like and subscribe for more writerly and bullet journal organizational content. This video is about how my book, my very first book, it found a publisher and then everything kind of went terribly wrong. In 2018, I was on a train up to a business meeting, a long train journey, 3 hours each way, and I was bored. My Wi-Fi wouldn't work because we were going through these big patches where there was no Wi-Fi, and I had a notebook with me that I had just bought because, of course, what stationary addict's not gonna buy a sparkly notebook whenever they have the chance? And so on my way home from this business meeting, I decided that I would sort of sketch out a plot for a book, in case I ever felt like writing it. So I sketched out this pretty elaborate plot in the 3 hours on the way home from this business meeting. And that's also what made me think that I was a plotter rather than a discovery writer, but that's a different video. So I got home, and the next day I was sort of playing around, and I wrote maybe the first half of a chapter. Half to 3/4 of a chapter, and asked my wife if she wanted to read it, and she said, well, yeah, I'll read it. And so she read it and she said, wow, this is really good, I'd love to see more. And at the time I was like, am I a writer? I've written lots of nonfiction here and there in my life. I've done tons of copywriting, I've done a fair amount of copy editing for other people, I've written lots of scientific things for journals for friends and that, but I wasn't sure if I was a fiction writer. So on her urging, I decided to write a bit more, and I wrote a bit more, and I wrote a bit more, and there was a few spaces in 2018 where I went a couple of months without working on the book at all because I was busy with other things, because I lost motivation. I didn't know what was going to happen next in the book because certain things changed as I was writing it. And so at the end of 2018, I had a mostly complete book. I had a first draft. I had a complete first draft, and then kind of in between the time, in the weird in-between time between Christmas and New Year's, I spent all of that time really aggressively editing the book. And so by 2019, I had what I thought was a pretty decently polished, it had been beta read by a bunch of different people, and I got really good feedback, and I thought, well, I don't know what to do with this now. I don't know if I actually want to publish. I don't really know. And my wife suggested, listen, just, throw it out there to a few publishers, see what happens. If nothing comes of it, then you can self-publish maybe, or you can consider something else, or you can just decide that it's not for you and you just really enjoyed writing one book, and that's fine. So I looked up a variety of different publishers. My book is about basically steampunk space pirate lesbians, and that's kind of a niche market, which I realize is very much a niche market. So there's not tons of publishers out there that are looking for sci-fi and fantasy books with romantic LGBTQ elements. I did find one publisher, and I thought, well, I'll submit it and I'll see what happens. I'm not expecting anything from this. So I submitted the book, I submitted the completed manuscript. This particular publisher had open submission, so I didn't go through the process of getting an agent first. I just went ahead and submitted it, which I have since learned is maybe not perhaps the best way to go about things, but I'm a newbie and didn't know anything. So I submitted this book to a publisher, and in sort of early February 2019, by early March 2019, the lead editor at this publisher got back, said, we would love to publish your book. We think it's got a lot of potential. We have a few editors that are really keen to be the editor for your book. And I was so thrilled. I was completely over the moon. I thought, how has this even managed to happen? How has this happened that I just submitted my first book to one publisher and it got picked up, and then I thought, well, you know, I better do my due diligence, make sure that it's a legit publisher, and indeed it was a legit publisher that tended to focus on LGBTQ plus books with romantic elements, but also with other sci-fi, horror, and fantasy elements as well. So I was really pleased. We went out to dinner, we, you know, got a bottle of champagne, I posted on Instagram, I told all of my friends, I was so excited, I was so thrilled, and, you know, submitted my manuscript after a couple of edits that I decided that I wanted to make before it went to the editor. So then the book went to the editor sometime in probably mid to late March. Flash forward, in June, early June 2019, we had planned on going away and spending a week or so at this campground in Southern Ireland that we really, really enjoy. We'd been there before, it was really relaxing, it was just a really delightful place, and we had planned this the entire year and we were really excited. And then a few days before we were supposed to go, I got an email from the lead editor saying, hey, the editor has finished her edits on your book, could you just, you know, go through and make all of the appropriate changes and then submit a finalized manuscript to us. I think they gave me 3 weeks or a month, which is reasonable, it was fine. But I was so stressed out and worried that I wouldn't be able to make the deadline if we carried on going on our sort of little week away at this campground that we decided to cancel it. So we didn't go, and we didn't go for our week away at this lovely campground because I was so worried I wouldn't finish edits in time to meet the deadline. So we came home early after this business thing that we'd been over there for, and I dove straight into the edits and, you know, really cleaned it up, and the editor had some really amazing suggestions about pacing and about the development of some of the characters, and overall I agreed with basically everything that this editor had said. And so I felt really good about the relationship that I had with this editor, going back and forth talking about the book's themes and everything. I thought we got along really well. So I submitted the finalized manuscript in late June, I think. Yeah, late June 2019. And then we started talking about cover art, and I sent over some thoughts about what I think would be cool, and they assigned it to one of their cover artists. And about a week after they told me they were sending the cover art to one of their cover artists, I saw on Twitter that the whole company was going under. They were canceling all books that were still pending. So everybody who already had books with them was getting their rights reverted, and all pending books were canceled. And I found this out on Twitter because for some reason my name didn't end up on their email list of authors that they needed to contact. I guess maybe because I was still pending and not a published author with them yet. Needless to say, I was totally crushed, and I only saw this on a whim because usually when I'm checking Twitter in the morning, I tend to check my main account, and then maybe later on in the day I'll check, you know, my author account if I remember that day, because I'm not super great about it, or I wasn't really at the time. And, you know, it was the first thing that I read that morning. The first thing I read was all pending books canceled, and so I immediately flipped out and I went, you know, looking, and I was like, where is this information coming from? And then realized that there had been an official announcement from the publisher, and I just felt completely crushed knowing that a book that was so close to being published and being a real thing in my hands was now just kind of like flung back into the void. And I'm the kind of person, I tend to bounce back from disappointments, I don't know, reasonably quickly. I'm a very solutions-oriented person. I tend to just be like, right, well, what can I do to fix the problem? What can I do to, you know, to make this better? And with this, because I was so new and I didn't know anything, I just felt adrift, and I fell into this really pretty bad depression for a couple of months because I just felt like I don't really know what to do now. I don't know if I should apply to, or I don't know if I should be submitting to agents. I don't know if I should try submitting to another publisher. I wasn't sure if I should just go ahead and self-publish and what that would mean. And I asked a group of people who were really avid readers. Lots of them run small bookshops or their librarians and their local libraries, and I said, you know, I don't know what to do, and I don't really know like even where to start. And that's what got me, is that I didn't even know where the right information to start looking was, because everybody's journey in publishing can be so different. It depends on what your skill sets are, it depends on what you're comfortable doing, it depends on a whole host of things. So I just felt completely lost and completely adrift, and I just felt really bummed and upset about the whole thing, because I had sort of pinned it in my head as this is going to be the one really cool, really good thing that happens in 2019, is that this book is going to get published. And then I just kind of felt like the rug was just yanked out from under me, and I really was struggling to kind of get back on the horse. I had been writing another book at the time that I found this out, and I didn't even want to touch it. I didn't want to touch this book. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to think about it. You know, even though I was being encouraged from my wife and from friends to be like, you know, don't give up. Like, you should just keep working on this book. And I just didn't want to. I just felt like, well, I feel like I've got no, you know, future where any of this is concerned. Now I'm feeling really frustrated. So I asked in this group, you know, what should I do? I've considered self-publishing. I don't know if that's going to be the right avenue for me. And I got feedback from people in there saying, well, if you self-publish, it can be difficult to get your books into libraries. It can be difficult to get your books into, you know, bookstores and small bookstores especially, and it becomes really difficult. And, you know, so that's probably not going to be your best bet. And I had a lot of people suggesting other publishers to go and research, but most of them weren't really right for my book, or they weren't accepting submissions, or people suggested agents that weren't accepting submissions. And so I just felt like I was getting a lot of information, and none of it was really like gelling. None of it was really settling into place, and which just made me feel more frustrated and more depressed and more like, oh my God, like I don't know what to do here. And I was feeling really bummed about it, and I just didn't know where to turn. And then slightly before, so that happened in sort of early July. Towards the end of July, a friend of mine, she said, I'm going to Worldcon in Dublin in August. You know, do you want to come along? You can stay in my accommodations. You know, I don't have any payloads of money on accommodation. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go, because it sounds like a lot of fun anyway. I can get a relatively cheap flight because I'm based near London. I can get a relatively cheap flight over to Dublin. And I thought, you know, I've been feeling so sorry for myself for so long. I just needed to go. So I went to Worldcon, and there was so many amazing panels, and you know when you just get like panel overload and you don't know which ones are going to be best. But I went to one that was specifically about self-publishing, because I thought, you know, there's going to be people on this panel that can give me some of the answers that I'm looking for, and I feel like it's going to be a smart move. So I made sure to be there way ahead of time to make sure that I would be able to get in, because the rooms were kind of small. And I ended up standing behind this very nice man, and we got to talking, and he said, oh, you know, how many books have you published? And I said, well, none. I said, I've not published any books. I said, and I sort of explained what had happened with the publisher, and this man looked at me and he went, ouch. And I thought, yes, thank you. I'm so glad that somebody understands like the really searing pain of what had happened. So we get to talking as we were standing in line for about 40 minutes before this panel actually opened up, and chatting back and forth about self-publishing. And he said, you know, if you have a book and it's already been professionally edited and you've basically got cover art already, he said, I would just self-publish it. He said, you know, with the other business that you run, you've already kind of got a base of people that could potentially be interested, because there's, you know, a fair amount of overlap. And he said, I'd have that book on Amazon by the end of the week. And I thought, well, that's perhaps a bit of a tight timeline for me, but he suggested that I join a Facebook group called 20 Books to 50K, and he suggested that I check out Joanna Penn for information about self-publishing. And I was like, thank you, you know, and we exchanged business cards, and that was really lovely. And then the panel was absolutely phenomenal, and I really got a lot of fantastic advice from an author called Eden Royce. I read a couple of her collections in 2019 after this event called Spooklights. They're Southern Gothic anthologies, fantastic. I highly recommend them. But she was basically saying, you know, self-publishing isn't what it was 10 years ago. It's different. You can be a successful author with self-publishing. You don't have to go through all of the steps of traditional publishing. If you're somebody who's really confident about your ability to learn marketing and stay on top of trends and run ads, and I already do that for my other business. So I was sitting there in this panel and I was thinking, well, maybe this, I don't know, maybe this is something that I can do. Maybe this is something that I can handle. And she said that she's a hybrid author, which means some of her stuff is traditionally published and some of her stuff is self-published. And I thought, well, that sounds really good to me. That sounds like something that I can totally manage. And so I went away from that feeling. I went away from the whole weekend that I spent at Worldcon feeling completely reinvigorated, and I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to just like smash and just dive in. And I really dove into all of these different resources that I'd been given and just absorbed tons of information. I took, you know, notebooks and notebooks worth of notes to decide what was going to be best for me. And I joined a couple of really amazing writing groups on Discord, and that's really kept me on track with not taking big gaps away from my writing now. I will say that when I found out my publisher was closing and I was really upset, I am super glad that I had the presence of mind and the forethought to contact the managing editor and say, listen, can you give me contact information for the person who edited my book, because I feel like we have a really good rapport and she saw where I was trying to achieve and she knew what I was going for, and I know that it can be really difficult to find a good editor if you're gonna try and self-publish. It's difficult to find someone that you'll gel with. And they said, oh, well, we'll let her know that you were trying to get in contact with her so that we're not just passing her information on, and so on and so forth. And so I was able to keep that connection with this editor that I gelled so well with, which I'm really super grateful to myself for having that forethought and that presence of mind. I will also say I've not named the publisher, and that's because, like, they don't deserve any flaming. They were really good to all of their authors, especially in the light of things that have been happening with other publishers within the industry, especially with LGBT focused books and novellas and anthologies, etc. They were really good to all of their authors. They made sure that nobody missed out on any royalties, nobody was out of pocket, and they returned everybody's rights 100% completely right away. So I can't say anything bad about them. It was just an incredible bummer that it happened to me at that time. But they don't deserve any, I don't have any bad feelings towards them. It was not their fault. They did the very best that they could and made sure that nobody got screwed over, which in this industry, let's be honest, is almost kind of a miracle. So I came home from Worldcon feeling really reinvigorated, and I was feeling really like, yeah. And so I sent an email to this editor who had edited my very first book, and I said, I'm thinking about writing another book. I just wanted to see if you would be willing to, you know, sort of work with me on a freelance basis. And she wrote back and she said, oh, I'd love to read the sequel to your book. I can't wait. Let me know a time frame. Let me know a word count. And I thought, oh, I wasn't planning on writing a sequel to this book. I was writing a completely different book that was meant to be a trilogy, and I'm still kind of working on it, but it's been put to the side for now. And so I started thinking, well, what if I did write a sequel to my first book? What if I turned it into a series? There's room for that. There's room within this universe. I think it didn't have like a super cut and dry ending. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized if I am going to self-publish, then I feel like a series is definitely the way to go. And so I started writing book 2 of this series. The first book is called Deus Ex Mechanic, and the second book is, it doesn't have a title yet, but the first book is about, as I said, steampunk space pirate lesbians, and it's a mechanic who works for this corrupt government regime who gets basically kidnapped by this pirate crew, and then, you know, sparks fly and all kinds of stuff happens. And then in book 2, it's basically an assassin and a bartender. So the first draft for that will hopefully be done by the end of this month, so the end of January 2020, fingers crossed. So in any case, I basically dove straight into writing this sequel. I put aside the other book that I was working on, which is probably about 30,000 words from the end of that book, because it had major structural problems and it really wasn't working well for me, and I sort of hit like a bit of a block with it. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna set this aside. It still has a lot of good, it's got some good bones, it's got a lot of good stuff happening in it, but it needs a major rework. So I set that aside and I dove into writing the sequel during NaNoWriMo for 2019. And I won NaNoWriMo, much to my incredible surprise, given how busy I was with other things that month, and then continued to kind of work on it through December, and now I'm hoping to finish it in January. And I'm feeling really energized, and I started this channel, and you're watching this video, and I'm sort of starting to kind of branch out and build things. And I will also say that after seeing this panel and Eden Royce talking about being a hybrid author, I came across submissions for a queer short story anthology. Okay, I found an open call for a queer Gothic anthology called the Unspeakable Gothic Anthology, and I decided that I was going to take a quick break from writing my sequel, and I was going to write a short story, a sort of Southern Gothic vampire rodeo short story, to really sum it up in a very short phrase there. And I wrote it, and I was really pleased with it, and I submitted it, but I thought nothing's probably going to come of this because it's a little dark. I mean, I know it's Gothic, but it's like dark. And at the end, and so basically I submitted it thinking nothing's probably going to come of it, but if that's the case, then maybe I'll write some more Gothic short stories, and maybe I'll self-publish an anthology at some point, who knows. But it turns out they really love my story, and so it is going to be published in the Unspeakable Gothic Anthology, which is totally open for pre-orders, I'm just saying, and will release, I think, towards the end of this month, so January 2020, towards the end of the month, you will be able to purchase it in ebook or soft cover. And I'm really excited because it's going to be the first thing of mine that gets out there and is published, even though I do have a finished book that is kind of waiting to be put up for pre-order. It needs things like cover art, and it needs to be formatted, and it has all these other things that need to be done before I'm going to feel comfortable putting it up for pre-order, because I don't want to overextend myself, let's just say that, until I kind of get to grips with the rhythm of what all of this is going to mean. So I'm really excited. It's going to be the first thing of mine that's out there, that's a published thing with Ryan Fletcher as the author on it, and I couldn't be more excited for the anthology. I cannot wait to show it to you all when it arrives. I can't wait to read the short stories from the other authors that are involved. I think it's a fantastic project, and honestly, I'm really excited about it, and I really hope that you'll all go pre-order it. And if you don't pre-order it, I hope you go and nab it when it goes live. I will post links down in the description. So that was a big long video to basically say that that's kind of what happened after my publisher went under, after they went, I guess, bankrupt. And that's kind of what happened. Super deep depression. Felt like I felt like a fish out of water. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where to turn. And I am honestly super grateful that I had the presence of mind to retain that relationship with that editor. And I'm also super glad that my friend lightly pressured me into going to Worldcon back in August, because the people that I met there sort of changed the way that I thought about self-publishing and made me think that it's something that's actually super attainable for me. So Deus Ex Mechanic will go up for pre-order sometime, hopefully within the first quarter of the year, I hope. And the sequel will be finished drafting, and then it will go into edits, and I will hopefully get that published towards the end of this year, and I will hopefully have book 3 drafted. It's already been planned. Book 3 will be drafted hopefully by the end of 2020. So that's kind of where I'm headed. I still feel like a fish out of water. I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, like I don't know what I'm talking about, and honestly I don't, but I hope that you all stick around here on YouTube. I hope you subscribe and you come back to sort of see me figuring things out as I go. If that's a thing that you're interested in, figuring out both self and traditional publishing as I go, as I sort of start this journey into writing fiction, which is something that I never thought that I would do. That's all I've got. Please do like and subscribe and drop a comment down below if you have any helpful tips. If you have any helpful tips, or hopefully not any hate. Thanks everyone. It's Ryan Fletcher signing off.